The collected teachings of Luang Porchaya from the March 11th, 2001 talk Mindfulness in Every Activity. Today I would like to talk about walking meditation and general practice in our daily lives. There are 6 sections of walking meditation. I'll be talking a bit about each of them today. When you practice walking meditation, your hands should be locked together in front of you or behind you. Then, look in front of you about 4 or 5 feet. If you look straight, it's too far, and your mind will be distracted. If you look at your feet or look at your legs, you will feel dizzy and feel stress in your neck. So when you practice walking meditation, you should look in front of you about 4 or 5 feet. This is good enough. Open your eyes halfway, just enough to be able to see your walking path ahead of you. When you sit in meditation, your primary object may be the rising and falling of your abdomen, or may be breathing in and out at your nostrils. But for walking meditation, your primary object is the movement of your legs or your feet. When you begin, you should first be aware of the standing position. As you stand, keep your attention from your head to the soles of your feet by noting, quote, standing, 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 standing. Note this maybe 4 or 5 times, but more than that is fine too. Your noting should be neither slow nor quick. Then you'll want to start your walking. Be aware of your intention. This is very important, so be aware of your intention and make a mental note, intending, intending, intending. After that, you have to practice walking meditation. As you do this, with each step your attention should be fixed on the movement from the point of lifting the legs to the point of putting them down. Begin by making a mental note, walking, walking, walking. For now, we're talking about the first of the 6 sections of walking meditation. Your steps and the noting mind should be together, simultaneous. It is very important that they are together as a pair, and it's very important for you to be aware of every movement in each step, from the beginning to the end of your step. This should be done in the present moment. This doesn't mean you have already walked and then you make a mental note later on. That's not correct. They should be at the same time. The walking and the noting mind should be together. Should any painful feelings occur during walking meditation, what do you have to do? Stop your walking for a bit and be aware of the painful 130 just practice feeling. Make a mental note. If you feel pain, just label it. Pain, pain, pain. To be clear, if you're practicing walking meditation and you have a painful feeling, you do not merely continue to focus your mind on the movement of your feet or legs. This is not correct. Because we practice mindfulness meditation, sometimes we contemplate the movement of the body, sometimes sensation, and sometimes the mind. As such, if any painful feelings occur during the walking meditation, stop for a while. Be aware of the painful feeling and contemplate it. Pain, 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 pain. After the pain disappears, continue your walking meditation. Sometimes you'll be practicing walking meditation and you think about something, or maybe your mind wanders. At that moment, be mindful of your thinking or your wandering mind. Make a mental note, thinking, thinking, or wandering, wandering. After that, continue your walking meditation. During walking meditation, we have to apply our mindfulness to painful feelings or any other mental state. This last week we were talking about noting, naming, or labeling. The word we say, such as thinking, thinking, or wandering, wandering, and so on, isn't so important. The important thing is to observe our mind and the movement of our feet. When we're practicing walking meditation, when you reach the end of your walking path, stop for a bit and make a mental note. Standing, standing, standing. This means you realize that you're standing. When you're noting the standing, your mind should be aware of the standing position. You're not just saying standing, standing, standing in your mind. That's not right. Your attention should be kept on the standing position, from your head to your soles. After you note the standing, you will want to turn around. Be aware of your intention, and then make a mental note about 4 or 5 times. Intending, 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 intending. Then you will have to turn around. When you're turning around, do it slowly and note it as turning, 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 turning. The turning and the noting mind should be simultaneous. Do the turning until you are in the position you want, and then stop for a bit and make a mental note 4 or 5 times. Standing, 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 standing. When we practice walking meditation, we don't need to be hurried about anything, so just move slowly. When you intend to walk again, note it as intending, 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 and then proceed with your walking, back and forth as usual. This is the technique for practicing walking meditation. In the context of Vipassana meditation, so far, we've just been talking about the 131, the collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya, basics of practicing the right way. Later on, we'll talk about why we have to make a mental note, why we have to be aware of our intention, and so on. A regular meditator may practice walking meditation 2 or 3 times a day, using the first section I've just described. That is enough. But in a meditation retreat, we have 6 sections to practice. After we are familiar with the first section, we'll be able to concentrate our mind very well, and then we have to go to the second section. The second section is lifting, dropping. Most meditators will only use the first section, walking, 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 and the third section, lifting, pushing, dropping. But now, for your knowledge, in case you want to try moving from one section to the next, I'd like to briefly talk about the second section. With the second section, for each step you have to be aware of the movement of your legs and make a mental note 2 times. When you lift your leg, you make a mental note of lifting, pause briefly, and drop the leg. When you drop your leg, be aware of the dropping of your leg and make a mental note of dropping, so just lifting and dropping, lifting and dropping. When you lift your leg, don't lift it too high, just normal. Lifting, dropping, lifting, dropping, lifting, dropping. You can practice this back and forth. During a meditation retreat, the meditation master will advise meditators to practice one section for a few days. After you're familiar with the first section, for instance, you go to the second section. During that second section, lifting, dropping, dropping. For each step, you'll be able to be aware of the movement of your legs 2 times. And after you're familiar with the second section, you go to the third section. The third section is very useful for everyone who meditates. When you practice this third section, you should slow your walking. For the first section, it's just walking, 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 so you don't have to slow down too much. But for the third section, you have to slow down your walking and practice in 3 steps. When you're about to lift your foot, say to yourself, intending, intending, intending. When you lift your foot, be mindful of the lifting and make a mental note, lifting, then pause for 1 or 2 seconds. When you push your foot forward, note it as pushing, then pause for a bit. Then you have to drop your foot. When you drop your foot to the floor, be mindful of the dropping. This mindfulness should follow every movement. As you drop your foot, make a mental note, dropping. 132. Just practice. When you practice this third section, you should notice that a pause occurs at the end of each section. Lifting, pause, pushing, pause, dropping, pause. It should take a few seconds to complete each step. You should also ensure that you have your foot completely on the floor before you lift the other foot to begin the next step. Usually, when we're practicing lifting, pushing, dropping, when we say dropping, the other foot has already started to lift for the next step. That's not right. You should have the foot completely on the floor, then lift the other foot to begin the next step. This is the correct way. Otherwise, you cannot gain concentration. So, it should be perfect. If you are going to sit in meditation for more than 1 hour, such as on a 1-day silent retreat, a weekend retreat, or an intensive meditation retreat, every session of sitting must be preceded by walking meditation. You should be careful to do this because the movement of the foot is more distinct than abdominal movement. The abdomen is rising and falling, but it's not as distinct as the walking movement of the foot. Therefore, you can attain some degree of concentration more easily than in sitting. But if you just sit in meditation for an hour or less, walking meditation isn't necessary. If you want, you can still do it for 5 minutes or so. But if you'll be doing more than 1 hour of sitting meditation, it must be preceded by walking meditation. Gradually, as your meditation practice matures, you may sit in meditation for longer periods than you do for walking. For instance, when you reach that point, you might go to a meditation center for a 10-day or month-long retreat, and you can sit for a few hours. If so, maybe just practice walking meditation for 45 minutes or 1 hour, and your concentration will be good. But normally, when you practice a one-day retreat or a weekend retreat, you should at least be practicing walking meditation for 1 hour, and then continuing your sitting meditation for 1 hour. You should be doing walking meditation at least 7 times a day, and sitting meditation at least 7 times a day. This is required in those situations. When you happen to practice walking meditation in a small space, or in your room, familiarity with these 6 sections is very useful. Sometimes you cannot go to a meditation center, and you may need to practice at home in a small room. In that case, if you practice walking, you'll be at the end of your walking path after 4 or 5 steps. You'll get dizzy. Our walking meditation should be done slowly in that 133 the collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya situation, so we need to know the 6 sections of walking meditation. It's very useful. For the 4th section, when you're standing, as usual, make a mental note. Standing, 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 standing. When you intend to walk, make a mental note. Intending, intending, intending. Now, you lift your heel and make a mental note. Heel up. Your attention should be on your heel. When you lift your leg, make a mental note. Lifting. When you push your leg forward, just note it as pushing. When you drop your foot, make a mental note. Dropping. So heel up, then stop for at least 1 second. Lifting, then stop for at least 1 second. Pushing. Then pause a second and dropping. After the foot is completely on the floor, you will then start the next step, heel up, lifting, pushing, dropping. Just practice this back and forth. After you're familiar with the 4th section, you can go to the 5th H section. For the 5th section, when standing, make a mental note. Standing. When you intend to walk, make a mental note. Intending. When you lift the heel, make a mental note. Heel up. When you lift your leg, make a mental note. Lifting. When you push your foot forward, make a mental note. Pushing. When you lower your leg, make a mental note. Lowering. When your foot treads on the floor, make a mental note. Treading. See? 5 sections. At the end of every segment, a pause should be noticed. Now, the 6th section is a very important section. I use this when I practice meditation for 3 months in my room upstairs. For this section, walking about 10 or 15 feet from one side of the room to the other may take 1 minute or more. As you stand there before starting, make a mental note. Standing, standing, standing. When you make this mental note, keep your attention from your head to your soles, noticing that you are standing. When you intend to raise your heel, just make a mental note. Intending, intending, intending. At the time you raise your heel, be aware of it and label it as heel up. The heel up and the noting mind should be at the same time. When you lift your foot, be aware of the lifting and say to yourself, lifting. When you push your foot forward, be aware of the pushing and note pushing. When you lower your foot, be aware of the lowering and say in your mind, lowering. Be sure that the foot hasn't touched the floor yet, and when your foot touches the floor, be aware of the touching and make a mental note. Touching. Before you begin the next step, you have to press your foot into the floor. At the time of pressing, be aware of it and note pressing. See? 6 steps. 134. Just practice. So, besides standing and intending, For each step you have to be aware of and make a mental note for 6 segments, including heel up, pause 1 second, lifting, pause 1 second, pushing, pause 1 second, lowering, pause 1 second, touching, pause 1 second. And before you start the next step, make a mental note, pressing, and then start the next step. So 10 or 15 feet in your room may take about 2 minutes. Do this 10 times, and it takes 20 minutes or half an hour. Practice these 6 sections as much as you can. After you're familiar with this 6th section, you can even close your eyes and do it slowly. Before you reach the end of your walking path, you may be able to sense that a door or a wall is very close, and so you stop and make a mental note. Stopping. And then standing, intending, turning. Do all of this slowly. You might practice this for 3 hours, but if you have gained concentration, you might think it's only been about 45 minutes. This is specifically for the 6th section of walking meditation. If you have confidence in yourself, you'll be able to note more than that. It doesn't have to be only 6 segments. For example, on a 1-day retreat, you can try to do this. When you stand, make a mental note. Standing. When you intend to walk, make a mental note 4 or 5 times. Intending. When you start to lift your heel, make a mental note, heel up. And then, as you know your heel is up, make a mental note, knowing. When you lift your foot, make a mental note, lifting. And then, as you know you're lifting, make a mental note, knowing. When pushing forward, make a mental note, pushing. As you know this, make a mental note, knowing. When you lower your leg, make a mental note, lowering. Then, as you know, make a mental note, knowing. When you touch the floor, make a mental note, touching. Then, knowing. When you press the floor, make a mental note, pressing, and then knowing. So it becomes how many mental notes? 12 mental notes. It's very detailed, and your mind has no time to wander because you have to be careful of every movement. You'll know every movement in detail. This is very useful for intensive meditation retreats. Now I would like to talk about transitioning between positions. We'll start by talking about transitioning from the standing position to the sitting meditation position. It's not right for us to practice walking meditation in such detail and then lose our mindfulness as we just walk quickly to the place we're going to sit. 135. The collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya. After you have practiced walking meditation, you should proceed directly to sitting meditation. The place where you sit in meditation should already be arranged, and so you walk slowly to it. And now, you intend to sit. When you intend to sit, just make a mental note, intending. Then, you sit down slowly. Keep the mind on the downward movement of the body, and note, sitting down. You should do this slowly. After you have sat on the floor, you must notice every movement in bringing the hands and legs into position. Don't just sit and right away continue with sitting meditation. You need to move and arrange your limbs slowly and mindfully. You need to know every movement until you are ready to sit in meditation. Then, as your sitting position is arranged, you next intend to close your eyes. When you intend to close your eyes, make a mental note, intending. When you close your eyes, make a mental note, closing. Now you're ready. As you are settled into the new position, just continue with contemplation of the abdominal movement or breathing in and out, depending on your main object of meditation. So, from standing to sitting, that is how we have to be aware. But we have to know how to transition from the sitting position to the standing position too. It's not right to finish sitting meditation and just get up and go somewhere. When you want to finish sitting meditation, you may want to open your eyes. Make a mental note, intending. When you open your eyes, be mindful of the opening and note it as opening. When you intend to stand, just make a mental note. Intending, intending, intending. When you stand, the act of rising should be carried out slowly, with the same deliberation as when you sat down, as if you're a sick person. A sick person must be cautious and move slowly to avoid pain. You should always try to keep slow motion in all actions, whatever you do. If you stand up, sit down, lie down, or walk, whatever you do, you should slow down. Every aspect of changing positions from sitting to standing should be done with awareness of every movement. For example, when you lift your hand, make a mental note. Lifting, lifting, lifting. When moving, make a mental note. Moving, moving. If your hand touches the floor, be aware of the touching. Don't just use the word, you should be aware of the actual touching. So, lifting, moving, touching. And then, to lift your legs, you have to press them against the floor. Just make a mental note. Pressing. Your attention should be on the pressing. After that, you try to stand up. When you stand up, make a mental note. Rising up, 136. Just practice. Or, standing up, standing up. Do this slowly. Every movement, until you are standing, should have a mental note. Then, you're standing, standing, standing. And then, continue your walking. That was from the sitting position to the standing position. Now, from the sitting position to the lying down position. Maybe you've been sitting in meditation at night before it's time for you to go to bed. Or even during the day, maybe you've practiced all day long doing standing meditation, sitting meditation, and walking meditation, and now you want to stretch your body and practice lying down meditation for a while. In either case, you should be aware of every movement involved in the act of changing from the sitting position to the lying down position. Each movement should be noted as appropriate, such as when bending your body, you should be aware of the bending and make a mental note. Bending. When you swing your body, be aware of the swinging and make a mental note. Swing, swing. When your hands press the floor, be aware of the pressing and make a mental note. Pressing. When your body touches the floor or your head touches the pillow, make a mental note. Touching. You should know every movement, every sensation, every touching. We have to be mindful of this, and you must notice every movement involved in bringing the hands and legs into position when lying down. Bring your hands and legs into position with awareness and appropriate mental notes, like moving, lifting, touching. Once you've established your lying down position, resume mentally, noting rising, falling, if you observe the movement of the abdomen. Alternatively, you can observe your nostrils breathing in and out, or just be aware of the sensation of touching at the nostrils. Another option at this point is to observe lying and touching, without observing the rising and falling or breathing in and out. For this technique, as you know you're lying, make a mental note. Lying. Keep your mind on the whole body lying down, from the head to the feet. And when you know there's touching, keep your attention on the touching of any part of your body with the floor or other surface. Alternate different parts of the body touching different things, such as your head touching the pillow, then your hand touching the floor, then your leg touching the floor, then your hands touching each other, then the legs touching each other, and so on. So you are aware and note lying, and then you are aware and note touching. The first touching may be your head and the pillow, then lying and touching again. This next touching is perhaps your back touching the floor. The next time, lying, and 137, the collected teachings of Luang Porchaya, touching, and maybe this time it's your hands touching each other, then lying and touching, and perhaps it's your leg touching the floor. A few other options. You can just be aware of lying and note lying, lying, lying. That's fine too. Similarly, you can just be aware of the sensation of touching and note touching. The number of notes you make depends on what is comfortable for you. For some, maybe rising, falling, lying, touching is good. For others, maybe only rising, falling is appropriate. You can use any of these techniques. So this was for transitioning from the sitting position to the lying down position. We have 4 postures, right? We've already talked about sitting meditation, walking meditation, and lying down meditation. Now we'll talk about standing meditation. When you practice walking meditation and reach the end of your walking path, you should stand as long as possible. Be aware of the standing posture and make a mental note. Standing, standing, standing. It depends on how long is comfortable for you, and we can just note it as standing. That's fine. Or we can be aware and note standing, touching, standing, touching. When you note standing, keep your attention from your head to your feet. If you observe 2 points, such as standing, touching, when you note touching, keep your mind on the touching of your left sole to the floor the first time, then the right sole to the floor the next time. You can use only touching, 2, touching, left heel touching the floor, touching, right heel touching the floor. If this is too easy, use 2, standing, touching, standing, touching. During a meditation retreat, you should continuously practice meditation from the moment you first wake up until you fall asleep. Some may sit in meditation for 1, 2, 3, or even 4 hours and then start talking and talking, or doing something else. That's not right. Your practice should be continuous. As such, we should also know how to practice meditation in our daily lives. We talked about the 6 sections for walking meditation, but normal people can't do this in daily life. Still, we should know the proper way to practice as we go about our day. So your contemplation should start at the moment you wake up. As you're getting up from the bed, mindfulness should be directed toward every movement of the body. Those meditators who are practicing during a meditation retreat, in particular, should be aware of every detail of the body's activities. 138. Just practice. If you intend to get out of bed, note, intending. If you prepare to move the body into position, you have to note, preparing, preparing. When you are in a sitting position, make a mental note, sitting, sitting. Should you remain sitting for any length of time, revert to contemplating the abdominal movements of rising and falling, or whatever your main object is. Because of the impurities of the body, we may now have to go to the restroom, or take a shower, or wash our face. For these activities, whether it's washing the face, taking a bath or shower, dressing or whatever, we should make a mental note and be aware of every physical activity involved. When you perform the act of washing the face, be mindful of every activity, such as looking, seeing, and so on. As you walk from your bed to the restroom, you should at minimum be aware of and note walking, walking, walking. When you stop before starting to wash your face, make a mental note, stopping, stopping. If you look at the water faucet, make a mental note, looking, looking. If you see something, such as a bar of soap, make a mental note, seeing, seeing, seeing. And then you may stretch your hand to pick up the soap. Be aware of the saint retching and make a mental note, stretching. As you hold the soap, be aware of the holding and make a mental note, holding, holding. And you're aware of the touching sensation, make a mental note, touching, touching. As you turn on the water, make a mental note, turning, turning. And as you wash the face, it may feel cold. Be aware of the cold feeling and make a mental note, cold, cold. Next, you may rub your face with the soap. At that moment, be aware of the rubbing and make a mental note, rubbing, rubbing, rubbing. And when you withdraw your hands from your face, make a mental note, withdrawing. Continue to be aware of every movement and make mental notes until you finish washing your face. For taking a shower, when you turn on the water, make a mental note, turning. If you bend down, make a mental note, bending. Be aware of the bending. If you handle the soap, make a mental note, handling, handling. If you rub your body, make a mental note, rubbing, rubbing, rubbing. If you feel cold, make a mental note, cold. If you're warm, make a mental note, warm. You should know every movement and every mental process. After you finish washing your face and taking a shower, you may also have to brush your teeth, right? At minimum, be aware of and note brushing, 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 brushing. Don't do it 139, the collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya, too fast. Do it slowly. If you rinse your mouth, make a mental note. Rinsing. Afterward, when you change your clothes, make a mental note. Dressing. When you stretch your hand to handle something, be aware and note it as stretching. If you raise your hand, make a mental note. Raising. If you prepare your new clothes, make a mental note. Preparing, preparing. Maybe you look at the mirror at some point. If so, make a mental note. Looking. When you see your image in the mirror, make a mental note. Seeing. If you turn around, make a mental note. Turning. When you walk away, make a mental note. Walking, walking, walking. This is all meditation, right? We need to practice this every day once we know the technique. For drinking, maybe you'll look at the faucet. If so, make a mental note. Looking, looking. If you see water, make a mental note. Seeing, seeing. If you stretch your hand to grab a cup, make a mental note. Stretching. If you touch the cup, make a mental note. Touching. When you bring it to your mouth, make a mental note. Bringing, bringing. When the cup touches your lip, make a mental note. Touching. Should you feel cold at the touch, make a mental note. Cold. When you swallow the water, make a mental note. Swallowing. When you withdraw your hand from your face, make a mental note. Withdrawing. And when you bring your hand down, make a mental note. Bringing. Bringing. So you can practice meditation even while drinking some water. We eat at least 2 or 3 times each day, right? During the act of eating, you should be aware of every action and every activity involved. When you move your hand, be aware of the movement, of the stretching, and make a mental note. Stretching, stretching. When your hand touches the food or the spoon, be aware of the touch sensation and make a mental note. Touching. When you hold the food, or maybe hold the spoon, be aware of the sensation of holding and make a mental note. Holding. Then maybe you dip a spoon into the dish or into some soup. In that moment, be aware of the dipping movement and make a mental note. Dipping. When taking the food, make a mental note. Taking. When bringing it to your mouth, make a mental note. Bringing. All activities must be observed and noted. When you look at the table, you may see a lot of dishes. You should make a mental note. Looking, looking, looking. If you see anything, make a mental note. Seeing, seeing, seeing. If you arrange something, make a mental note. Arranging. When you bend down to eat, be aware of the bending of your body and make a mental note. 140. Just practice bending. When you use your hand or your spoon and touch the food to your mouth, make a mental note. Touching. When you place the food or spoon in your mouth, make a mental note. Placing. Then, you need to close your mouth. Make a mental note. Closing. So this process is very detailed. After you close your mouth, what do you do next? Cue. Chewing. Not yet. Luang Por laughs. Next, you withdraw your hand and make a mental note. Withdrawing, withdrawing. When your hand touches the table or any part of your body, make a mental note. Touching. You then straighten your body and make a mental note. Straightening. Then, you chew. Make a mental note. Chewing, 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 chewing. When you know the taste, oh, this is sweet, just make a mental note. Knowing, knowing. Even if you know the food's good, it's just knowing, knowing. When you intend to swallow, make a mental note. Intending, intending. When swallowing, make a mental note. Swallowing. When the food goes down your throat, you'll feel the sensation of touch. Make a mental note. Touching, touching. So when you eat, try to practice this as much as you can. At least be aware of and mentally note, chewing, chewing, chewing. You must be mindful of your actions and proceed with contemplation. Contemplation, or observing, or noting, all mean the act of keeping the mind fixed on the object and knowing it clearly, without your mind going anywhere else. Now, briefly, I'll say that on every act of seeing, you should just make a mental note. Seeing, seeing. On every occasion of hearing, concentrate your mind on the ear and make a mental note. Hearing, hearing. If you get any smell, concentrate your mind on your nose and make a mental note. Smelling, smelling. When you eat something, you will know the taste. With every occasion of knowing the taste, make a mental note. Tasting, tasting. In the case of knowing a feeling, or the sensation of touching in the body, or any mental state, it should be noted. If there's pain, make a mental note. Pain, pain. If there's numbness, make a mental note. Numb. Or if it feels hot, just make a mental note. Hot, hot, hot. If you think about something, just make a mental note. Thinking, thinking, thinking. If the mind is wandering, make a mental note. Wandering. 141. The collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya. As the case may be, this mindfulness must be applied to all postures of the body. We have 4 postures, right? We have standing, sitting, walking, and lying down. And we also have the small movements, such as stretching your hand or your legs, or bending, or looking around, right? We also have looking forward, or looking sideways. You should be aware of every posture, even these small movements. Your mental note of each rising and falling movement of the abdomen must be made while the movement occurs. If your main object is breathing in and breathing out, your noting should be while the in-breath or out-breath occurs. It should be in the present moment. And when you make a mental note of your abdominal movement as your primary object, you're not concerned with the form of the abdomen. Instead, what you're actually perceiving is the bodily sensation of abdominal pressure, which is caused by the expansion and contraction of the abdomen. When you practice on respiration at your nostrils, you're not supposed to see the form of your nose. It should be the sensation of touching that you're observing. So if you practice rising and falling of the abdomen and see the form of your stomach, this is a concept. It's not reality, and so it's not correct. And likewise, if you see your nose in any form, it's not right. It should be the sensation of touching that you're aware of. And also, avoid rapid breathing for the purpose of making the abdominal movement more distinct. If the movement of your stomach is not clear, it's not right to make it more rapid. Everything should be normal. This is proper Vipassana meditation technique. Let's talk a bit more about general practice in our daily life. Walking meditation is very useful for everyone. Everyone from the time they get up in the morning until they go to sleep is going in and out, up and down, back and forth many times a day. In one day, a person might walk 1,000 steps, but generally, people forget to contemplate even one step. You can see people around you who don't know how to practice this meditation. They get up each morning and walk many, many steps all day until they fall asleep, but they don't contemplate even one step. Practicing meditation is not just for when you're sitting, it's also for the other postures. Therefore, you can practice this mindfulness meditation at any time, anywhere, and in any posture. Granted, there are people who have to work hard and cannot devote their time for regular sitting meditation. Instead, they need to focus their mind on the movement of their steps, being mindful of their 142. Just practice stepping as much as possible and make a mental note. Walking, walking. That's enough. In this way, they will be able to concentrate their mind on the movement of their feet, and over the course of a single day, the noting time will be not less than 1 hour. See, it's very useful for everyone. Wherever you go, even at home, just walking around, up and down, back and forth. Sometimes you go outside, or at work, walking all the time. Sometimes for 8 hours a day. Just daydreaming and thinking about things isn't right. If you know the way of practice, it's very useful. When walking, just make a mental note. Walking, walking, walking. Be aware of the movement, observe it, and make a mental note. So in one day, the noting time may be more than 1 hour. It's not necessary to say, I don't have time to practice meditation. You already practiced, right? And even if you have to work 8 hours a day, you can sit and relax while contemplating the rising and falling of your abdomen or focusing on your breathing in and breathing out during your break times. We don't work 8 hours straight through. We still have break times. Whenever you sit on a chair or a sofa, even for a few minutes at home or at work, you can concentrate your mind on your nostrils or your abdomen or on sitting or touching, whatever. So 5 or 10 minutes at a time, many times over the course of the day, add up to more than 1 hour of meditation each day. You can practice even while working, even if you are a student or a business person, busy reading or writing or studying or doing other things when you're at home. You should use your time beneficially by contemplating for 10 or 15 minutes each hour. So for 10 to 15 minutes every hour, just close your eyes and concentrate your mind on your primary object, breathing in and breathing out or rising and falling, and then continue your work or your study. You can do this. And at minimum, each time you eat, you might spend an hour eating. Your chewing should be noted. Even if it's not detailed, just mentally note chewing. In eating one meal, how many times do you chew the food? Maybe over 100 times. So make a mental note of chewing whenever you're eating. This is meditation time. See? You can gain enlightenment even while eating, so you should be mindful all the time. We talked about how you can lay down, put both of your hands on your abdomen, and fix your mind on the rising and falling of the abdomen, or on the breathing in and breathing out. When you go to bed, 143, the collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya, you should do this until you fall asleep. By contemplating your abdominal movement or your nostrils during breathing in and breathing out for a while, you may fall asleep. That's good for your health. Without taking any sleeping pills, you can sleep soundly. You are saving energy and resting well. You work so hard during the day and sometimes you can't sleep well. It's not supposed to be like that, right? But by using this technique, you are saving your energy and resting well. And if you contemplate the rising and falling of the abdomen or breathing in and breathing out at the nostrils for half an hour or an hour without sleepiness, it is good for your concentration, for your mental development. If you don't have time during the day to practice meditation, you can practice for 30 minutes or 1 hour before you fall asleep. This is very good for your mental development. All of these techniques help you accumulate a lot of merit, virtue, perfection, and mental development in your daily life, which by doing them every day will lead you to achieve your spiritual liberation. That's why I would like to suggest to all of you that you don't let your time pass by meaninglessly. Instead, use your time to be beneficial by contemplating mental and physical activities. May all of you be able to attain your spiritual goal and whatever else you're longing for. Any questions? Q. I have a question about sensation. You say it's a reality, but it's only temporary also. Yes, everything's impermanent. Q. But isn't sensation a mental fabrication, just a concept, like form? No, it's not a concept. In Pali, sensation is Vedana. Vedana is one kind of mental state. Be careful about this. When most people feel sensation, they say it's the body. It's not the body. Sensation is one kind of mental state. Q. How can that be a reality if it's just a mental state? 144. Just practice mental states are realities. There are 4 kinds of realities: consciousness or mind, mental states, matter, and nibbana. Except for these 4, everything's a concept. Q. So all mental states are realities? It can be a mental fabrication though, right? Yes. Q. So focusing on the movement of the body, that's not a mental state? No, the movement is the air element, caused by the mind. It's one kind of matter. Movement is not a mental state, it's one kind of matter. Q. When you meditate, if you focus on movement, yai are focusing on matter. But if you're focusing on sensation, yai are focusing on mind. Sensation is Vedana. Remember that we have the 4 kinds of mindfulness meditation. If you focus on movement, it's kaya. If you focus on sensation, that's not mind. It's Vedana. If you think about something, thinking, or your mind wanders, wandering, you're focusing on your mind or citta. Q. What about other kinds of mental states? Can you be aware of those mental states, and how would they be categorized? We have 52 mental states. For example, when you eat, you know the taste, right? You make a mental note. Knowing. Who is knowing? This knowing is paññāña. Paññāña is wisdom. Wisdom consists of mental states, see? Or there's metta. You pray for or love someone. Metta is one kind of mental state. Or you want to do something. The intention is one kind of mental state. There are a lot of mental states. Q. So all of that fits into what category? Mental states are part of Dhammanupassana. Q. What does Dhamma mean in this context? We have 2 kinds. 145. The collected teachings of Luang Por Chaya. If you say Dhammadhamana, mind objects, this is consciousness and mental states, the 5 sense bases, the 16 subtle material properties, nibbana, and concepts. These are called Dhammaramana. We can take these as mind objects. But there's also Dhammanupassana. We have the 4 foundations of mindfulness, right? We have form, feeling, mind, and mind objects. Dhamma. Be careful. With Dhammanupassana, the Dhamma here is that you can observe the 5 hindrances, the 5 aggregates of attachment, the 6 internal and external bases, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 4 noble truths, just these 5. So this is the difference between Dhammaramana and Dhammanupassana. Q. So if you're meditating on the 52 mental states, this is part of Dhamma, right? Yes. Q. Why do they separate out Vedana if it's one of the 52 mental states? Vedana is more evident than other mental states, so it's by itself. These others we might not even realize, so they are in a different group. When we practice meditation, though, we experience Vedana in a more dominant way, so it's classified on its own. Q. Like Kaya, it's also part of Dhamma. Kaya is the 4 great essential elements. Q. So it's not just about being aware of movement. It's also being aware of the properties of each of the movements. It's about their nature. The movement is not a concept. It's the nature of the air element. We can study the specified characteristics and the common characteristics. The specified characteristic of the air element is the movement, but the common characteristic is impermanence. Q. So even though you can call them a reality, they are impermanent. Vedana is a reality, but it's impermanent. 146. Just practice everything is impermanent. Q. What about nibbana? Nibbana is permanent. It is permanent happiness and anatta. It is different. Conditioned things are impermanent, suffering, and not self. Q. So reality is the 4 noble truths? Yes, exactly. Nibbana is Nikka, Sukha, and Anatta. 147.